Imagine everything you thought you knew about ancient civilizations was wrong. What if the timeline you studied in school, the dates carved into every history textbook, were fundamentally flawed? It's an uncomfortable thought, but it's the reality historians and archaeologists face every single day. For centuries, we have treated history as a set of finished facts, a collection of dates and names set in stone. We believe the story of humanity is already written. But forget what your history books told you. Groundbreaking new archaeological finds are proving that much of what we think we know about the past is simply outdated or even completely false. This isn't about small details. This is about seismic shifts. We are talking about discoveries so profound, relics, stone carvings, fragments of DNA, that they are forcing scholars to completely rethink civilizations, timelines, and even the very nature of human progress. They are rewriting the foundational story of who we are. What if I told you there are secrets buried beneath our feet that are about to flip history on its head? From forgotten empires to astonishing technological feats, newly discovered artifacts are unearthing truths that will radically change how we perceive our past. History, we must understand, is not a fixed record. It is a living, breathing subject, constantly evolving based on what the Earth decides to reveal next. Every new artifact is an inconvenient truth for the established narrative. It forces us to admit that our knowledge is incomplete and our assumptions are fragile. Get ready for the truth behind the history we've been told. Join us as we reveal the incredible objects that are forcing us to discard old narratives and embrace a far more fascinating and sometimes shocking version of history. The history we learn in school is a comfortable narrative. It's linear, logical, and often neat. But the ground beneath our feet is a messy, complicated library. And every time an archaeologist pulls a new book off the shelf, the official story gets a powerful edit. Now, let's dive into 3 powerful case studies that are actively challenging the historical canon, starting with the one that literally pushed back the clock on civilization. For generations, the accepted wisdom was this: agriculture came first. Humans settled down to farm, and only then did they have the surplus time and resources to build complex societies, religious centers, and monumental architecture. This narrative defined the start of the Neolithic era and civilization itself. Then came Göbekli Tepe. Unearthed in southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe is a stunning collection of massive, carved limestone pillars arranged in circles. What is astonishing is its age, over 11,000 years old, dating it to around 9600 BCE. To put that in perspective, that's thousands of years older than Stonehenge and the earliest Egyptian pyramids. The implication is monumental. People built this enormous, intricate religious complex before they invented farming. They were nomadic hunter-gatherers. This single site flips the old story on its head. It suggests that monumental religion and social structure, not farming, might have been the driving force that led people to settle down and eventually to develop agriculture to feed the large groups needed to build these sites. Göbekli Tepe is the ultimate evidence that the progression of humanity was far more sophisticated and far earlier than we ever dared to imagine. Now let's turn our attention eastward to the unification of China under the fearsome first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. When we talk about the Qin dynasty, our minds immediately conjure the terracotta army, the vast, disciplined ranks of clay soldiers guarding the emperor's tomb. This discovery painted a picture of a rigidly hierarchical, military-focused society obsessed with material power continuing into the afterlife. But recent, less publicized excavations in the area are rewriting our understanding of the spiritual world of the Qin elite. We're finding elaborate jade burial suits, finely carved ritual vessels, and personal artifacts that suggest something different entirely. These weren't just about military might. They reveal a deeply complex and individualized spiritual belief system. While the terracotta army represented the emperor's public, political power, these jade finds suggest a private quest for immortality and a sophisticated understanding of cosmology and ritual that went beyond simple bureaucracy. These artifacts show the Qin were also thinkers, mystics, and artisans of incredible skill, not just ruthless conquerors. The narrative is shifting from Qin the warlord to Qin the philosopher king, revealing a much richer and, frankly, more human complexity to the dynasty that founded Imperial China. Finally, let's travel to a quiet construction site in Kent, England, where the discovery of a lavish Roman villa mosaic completely changes our perception of Roman Britain. For decades, the historical consensus viewed Roman occupation of Britain as largely military and administrative, fading relatively quickly after the legions withdrew around 410 AD. But this new find, an exceptionally large, detailed, and technically brilliant mosaic, likely the floor of a wealthy Romanized Britain's home, doesn't just confirm the presence of Romans, it confirms the depth of cultural integration. This wasn't a military outpost. This was a vibrant, wealthy, and highly Romanized community that invested heavily in long-lasting, sophisticated cultural assets. An artifact like this forces historians to reevaluate the scale and duration of Roman influence. It shows that Britain wasn't just a distant province being reluctantly governed. It was a flourishing cultural extension of the empire, with a locally wealthy class that fully embraced Roman art, architecture, and lifestyle. It demonstrates that the so-called end of Roman Britain was a much slower, more complex, and more integrated process than the textbooks often describe. From pushing back the birth of civilization by millennia at Göbekli Tepe to uncovering the spiritual complexity of the Qin and demonstrating the depth of Roman cultural roots in Britain, these artifacts prove one thing: the past is not static. It is a constantly shifting landscape. And the reason we know this is because the tools we use to look at the past are constantly evolving too. Next, we will explore the cutting-edge science that is turning the archaeologist's trowel into a high-tech instrument and how this is accelerating the rate at which we rewrite history. We've seen how ancient artifacts can shatter our timelines, but the true revolution lies in how we find them. The pace of historical rewriting is accelerating because the archaeologist's trowel is now augmented by high-tech instruments, allowing us to ask entirely new questions and expand the geographical and cultural boundaries of history. We are no longer limited to what we can see on the surface or what we can dig by hand. Instead, we are looking through the earth, through the forest canopy, and inside the human body itself. The first step is LIDAR, light detection and ranging. This is a game changer. LIDAR uses laser pulses fired from a plane or drone. It penetrates dense forest canopy, digitally removing the trees to reveal the bare earth beneath, exposing structures hidden from human sight for 1,000 years or more. LIDAR is literally redrawing the map of ancient urbanism. In the jungles of Central America, it didn't just find a few lost Mayan sites. It revealed vast, sprawling megacities connected by complex causeways. It proved that these civilizations were far more extensive, urbanized, and transformative to their landscape than we ever thought possible. But maps aren't just about lines on the ground, they're about people. Here, multidisciplinary science steps in. We now use aDNA, ancient DNA analysis, and stable isotope studies to trace human movement and identity with startling accuracy. This is how we map who was where and when. For example, by analyzing the chemical signatures of elements like strontium locked into teeth, scientists can determine where a person grew up. If a Roman soldier is buried in Britain, but his teeth show the distinct strontium levels of North Africa, we instantly redraw the map of his individual life and the true scale of Roman logistical and multicultural might. Similarly, aDNA analysis is showing us that the Vikings were not simply monolithic Scandinavians, but a diverse population with genetic links across southern Europe. These techniques transform history from generalized accounts of cultures to highly specific individual biographies, forcing us to acknowledge a much more interconnected and dynamic ancient world. The combination of high-tech discovery and lab-based analysis has made history a constantly self-correcting science. It's proving that ancient borders were more permeable and ancient societies more complex than our textbooks allowed. But what happens when an artifact is so fundamentally strange, so out of place, that it doesn't just redraw the map, It throws the map away entirely. That is when we confront the immense power of the anomalous. We've established that modern technology allows us to find and analyze artifacts with unprecedented precision. But the relationship between the archaeologist and the historian isn't just a simple handover of data. It's a dynamic, two-way street, a continuous feedback loop that is the very engine of historical revision. Think of it this way. Archaeology provides the evidence. History provides the context. Without the artifact, the history is mere theory. Without the historical framework, the artifact is just a curious object. On the first half of the loop, the artifact dictates the terms. It is the primary source that bypasses centuries of written bias. A great example of this is the Antikythera mechanism. Discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, this object baffled researchers for decades. Based on historical texts, classical Greek technology wasn't supposed to be this advanced. Written history told us they had great philosophy and math, but little complex mechanics. Yet this single bronze device, an analog computer for predicting astronomical positions and eclipses, proved that their engineering capability was centuries ahead of accepted historical knowledge. The artifact didn't ask permission. It simply forced historians to rewrite the chapter on Hellenistic science. It provided the indisputable physical proof that demanded a re-evaluation of the entire civilization's technological sophistication. That is the ultimate power of the material record. The second half of the loop is equally important. Historians guiding archaeological questions. It's not just random digging. Much of archaeology is driven by the gaps, anomalies, or frustrating silences in the historical record. Historians identify the missing pieces and turn them into targeted archaeological questions. A brilliant example is the search for the lost city of Iram, or Ubar. This city was not found by chance. It was found because historians and geographers pored over ancient texts, maps, and even religious scripture that described a magnificent, wealthy trading post buried by the sands of the Arabian Peninsula. The historical records provided the hypothesis. Using that textual evidence, modern archaeologists applied technology, in this case NASA satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, to pinpoint the exact location in the harsh, featureless desert. The historians defined the what and where, and the archaeologists then provided the physical proof. This collaboration resulted in the discovery of massive fortified ruins, confirming a city previously relegated to myth. This dynamic tension, the artifact challenging the text and the text guiding the search for the artifact, is crucial. It means history is a process of constant refinement, a negotiation between the written word and the physical object. The loop ensures that no historical claim is ever truly safe from being overturned by a shovel and a scientist in a lab coat. But what happens when an artifact is so far outside the accepted historical spectrum that it completely breaks the loop? When it defies context, contradicts all evidence, and simply shouldn't exist? That is when we encounter the power of the anomalous. We've seen that the archaeology-history feedback loop is generally a cycle of refinement, a constant self-correction. But what happens when an artifact refuses to fit, when the evidence is so strange, so far outside the accepted historical spectrum, that it completely breaks the system? This is the power of the anomalous. Anomalous artifacts are like historical wrenches thrown into the gears of consensus. They are the discoveries that shouldn't exist, based on everything we thought we knew about the technological or geographical limits of ancient cultures. They force us to have Rosetta Stone moments, not just finding a key to translate a language, but finding a key to unlock an entirely new level of historical understanding. Consider the Baghdad Battery. Found near Baghdad, Iraq, this object consists of a terracotta jar, a copper cylinder, and an iron rod. Discovered in the 1930s, its structure strongly suggests it was an electrochemical cell, a primitive battery, dating back to the Parthian era, perhaps over 2,000 years ago. If this interpretation is correct, it means knowledge of electricity and electrochemical principles existed centuries before the accepted history of electrical science began in the 17th and 18th centuries. The artifact is so anomalous that historians are divided. Was it a novelty? Was it used for basic electroplating? Or does it point to a vast, lost body of ancient scientific knowledge? The artifact exists, but the historical context to explain it does not. The anomaly challenges the very definition of ancient technology. This brings us to the most powerful and often most resistant force in the feedback loop: human bias. Historians and archaeologists are not robots. They are educated individuals who have invested their entire careers in a certain historical narrative. When a find like the Baghdad battery appears, the natural human instinct is often not immediate acceptance, but resistance. This resistance is structural. Major historical revisions require rewriting textbooks, altering museum exhibits, and shaking up academic departments. It's much easier to label the new evidence as an outlier, an aberration, or a misinterpretation than it is to admit the foundation of your life's work might be flawed. Historians, like all people, bring their own preconceptions, their own culture, their own educational bias to the work. But the mark of a healthy intellectual process is the willingness to embrace this discomfort. The moment a scientist or historian looks at an artifact and says, "I cannot explain this, and it contradicts everything I believe," that is the moment history moves forward. We must resist the urge to immediately shoehorn new facts into old theories. The job of the modern historian isn't to defend the established narrative. It's to be the chief skeptic of it. We should actively seek the anomalies, the outliers, and the contradictions. Because the objects that cause the most trouble, the ones that defy simple explanation, are precisely the ones holding the key to the truly unwritten chapters of human history. The history books on your shelf are not the end of the story. They are simply the best draft we have right now. And with every new discovery, every new anomaly, the next draft becomes more complex, more surprising, and infinitely more fascinating. The ground is still revealing its secrets, and those secrets promise to reshape our understanding of not just the past, but the very potential of humanity. We've journeyed from the deep past of Göbekli Tepe, which reset the timeline of civilization, to the complex analysis of aDNA, which remapped human movement, and even explored the frustrating mystery of anomalies like the Baghdad battery. If there's one truth we've uncovered today, it's this: history is not a monument, it is a work in progress. The accepted historical narrative is simply the most compelling story we can tell with the evidence we possess right now. But that evidence is incomplete, and every day, technology and curiosity are forcing the Earth to yield new secrets. So, where are the next great historical earthquakes coming from? The frontiers of archaeology are shifting dramatically. We are looking beneath the waves, where melting glaciers are starting to reveal incredibly well-preserved artifacts from lost ancient cultures. And deep beneath our largest cities, where urban archaeology is unearthing layers of previously ignored human occupation. Think about the potential. A lost library hidden in a desert cave, the true evidence of sophisticated ancient energy generation, or artifacts that conclusively prove transoceanic contact centuries before Columbus. These finds aren't science fiction. They are the realistic next chapter of human history, currently buried or submerged, waiting for the right technology and the right mind to find them. The ongoing journey of historical discovery is the story of humanity's greatest strength: the ability to question, to revise, and to learn from the physical record. It requires us to shed our biases and embrace the discomfort of being wrong. The most profound historical truth is that the story is never truly finished. Every one of us, whether you are a scientist in a lab, a historian in a library, or just someone looking at a newly discovered artifact online, is a participant in writing the final, complex, and beautiful narrative of human existence. What is the next great secret the Earth will reveal? What piece of history do you think is waiting to be rewritten? Join the conversation. Hit subscribe to continue exploring the unwritten chapters, and tell us in the comments below. Which lost civilization are you most hoping an artifact will prove real?